Welcome to Parenting How Not to Suck. Good news is, if you clicked on this button, it means you absolutely do not suck. Parenting is the hardest job in the world. We are not given a manual when we have children, and there's no such thing as a perfect parent. You're here because you want to make your journey more fun and you want to connect more with your kids, and you just want to hear some real stories about parenting that not everybody's talking about. So that's what we do here. My name is Natalie McCabe. I'm a former teacher and now parent coach. And I'm so happy to have with me today Miss Evelyn Vieira. Evelyn is a survivor and a thriver of childhood trauma. We all have had some. Narcissistic abuse and family dysfunction. She knows what it feels like, what it's like to feel discouraged, defeated, and lost as a parent. She is passionate about helping parents heal their own childhood trauma by decoding their dysfunction and learning effective tools to break the cycle for themselves and their children. Evelyn has been supporting families for the past 20 plus years as a trauma support specialist, parent coach, certified positive discipline educator, professional nanny, preschool teacher, and foster child advocate. Welcome, Evelyn. So glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Natalie.
There's so much training and everything that you've gone through, that what you went through in your life, but then you have all these certifications. And so I'm going off script right off the bat. I'm going
That's
with my
okay.
gut, as I
So
do. That's
life
why
is
this is a
not
chat.
scripted, so
That's right.
it's all good.
This is a chat. What so many different certifications and such a well-roundedness as a coach. What kind of drew you to all of those different things as the process went on?
If I can be really blunt,
You can, because this is a
here,
YouTube chat.
this is the place to be blunt.
Yeah.
It was my own pain. It was my
Mm,
own pain when I became a stepmom before I became a biological mom.
right.
And that was 12 years ago when I met my stepdaughters. They were 5 and 7 at the time. And I had dreamed of becoming a mom, knew that was
Yeah.
part of my purpose, had always wanted to be a mom. And then when I stepped into that step parent role, it just became what I call a dumpster fire
Yeah.
because I just brought what I didn't realize at the time was dysfunctional parenting tools to this dynamic with them. I was very
Mm,
controlling. I was
yeah.
extremely rigid when I set
Mm,
rules. I did not give them any choices or give them any autonomy. I was just a control freak. I dominated and told them what to do a lot of the time. And I felt very responsible for their
yeah.
feelings and their behavior and making sure that they acted right because I thought that was
Hmm.
my job.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize at the time. Now looking back, I'm like, yes, it's obvious, but all of the things I was doing was not only, those weren't only dysfunctional tools, those were also trauma responses from my own childhood that were
Right.
manifesting in my relationship with my stepdaughters. And I tell people I came into this work because of my own pain, my
Yeah.
own feeling so powerless as a parent and feeling so defeated and I felt like I was banging my head against the wall. What is the problem? What is
Yeah.
wrong? Because I was doing what I thought I should do to hold them accountable by
Hmm.
setting rules and setting expectations and then disciplining them when they made mistakes. But I didn't realize the way I was doing it was the
Yeah.
dysfunctional part. And that there's
Mm,
a healthy way to do it and there's a toxic way to do it. And I was doing it the toxic way, which was creating all of these other problems like
yeah.
defiance and backtalk and meltdowns and tantrums and so I came into this not because I wanted to.
Yeah.
I came into it because I was like, what am I doing wrong? And this sucks. And I don't want to be a parent if this is what parenting is. And I
Yeah.
really had a few soul searching moments, with my husband. We were dating at the time, but I was like, dude, like, I don't know if I can
Yeah.
do this. I love you, but
Yeah.
this whole stepmom thing this is hard. And it was so much harder than I thought it was going to be, especially coming into it as a nanny. I had worked in preschools. I
Yeah.
thought like, piece of
We all
cake.
do.
I know
Yeah.
kids. Kids love me. I love kids.
Yeah.
But nannying someone else's kids or watching someone else's kids is so different than stepping into a parenting role.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it was basically my own pain that
Yeah.
brought me into this work.
Yeah. And step parenting too, it's not talked about enough. It's doubly difficult because you have the expectation of your partner and you want to have this little happy family. And then you have the other parent whatever
Mhm.
their situation is. There's so many more dynamics in that situation that make it more difficult to find the find a positive way to connect with these children, right? And are
Absolutely.
they in a space to connect with you? Yeah, that
Yeah.
gets so complicated. I think we might have to do another recording just on step parenting because I haven't
Yeah.
had any guests yet that have a experience in that, and I think it's not something you hear talked about a lot at all, really.
Not nearly enough.
Not enough, like, because I really feel step parents in both genders really could help use some guidance and some help with the for sure, because
Mhm.
parenting's challenging enough, right? Like
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
all the different types of parents, but you have some parenting traps that
Yep.
parents fall into that are pretty common, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And that we're not beating ourselves up about any of this. Just want to say, disclaimer,
Mhm. Right.
no guilt allowed. If you're listening, we all do these things. Like you said, you knew about kids, struggled as at times about parenting. I worked with kids my whole life, struggled at times in my parenting, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. We all have these struggles. So what are some of those traps?
Okay, so in my work and everything that I've learned, I pick up on patterns. And in the last several years, I've been putting together like these different strategies and just different patterns that I've picked up on within dysfunctional parenting as well as dysfunctional relationships in general. And I've narrowed it down to what I call these are 6 parenting traps that often keep us stuck in toxic cycles with our kids. So,
Yeah.
for any parents who are watching this or listening to this, these are things that you may have received from your parents. And a lot of
Mhm.
this is in our mindset. And
Yeah.
that's part of what I do is I teach parents how to get unstuck from these parenting traps. And detox, I call these the crappy habits. Detox these
Yeah.
crappy habits because they're so ingrained in us, we don't even know that
Yeah.
they're there. And so
Exactly.
I've narrowed it down to 6. So I'm going to tell you what they are.
Yeah.
I have my notes here so I don't miss any of them. The first one, which is what I mentioned a second ago, is having really rigid rules that leads to rebellion and resentment. So
Yes.
if you are experiencing resentment or retreat is another part of that too, is where kids will, your son or daughter or child will retreat to their room or they will rebel against you or become resentful towards you.
Yeah.
Those are symptoms of toxic patterns. And a lot of the time, it gets stuck with like having very rigid rules where we
Yeah.
set a rule, you have to obey this rule. If you don't obey this rule, there's a consequence.
Yeah.
Where there's no room for a kid to have a bad day, there's no
Mhm.
room to be cranky in the moment or to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And so when we get stuck with rigid rules, it oftentimes leads to resentment and all of those other things. So
Yeah.
that's the
For
first
sure.
one. And then ego and fear driven parenting.
Yes, sir.
That's a
Done
that's a
that.
really big one, and parents a lot of the time are like, I don't have a big ego." And I'm like, "Here's a little test to know if your ego is attached to your child's behavior. If your child does something well and they're doing great in school and you're really feeling, 'Oh, I'm a good parent because they're
Yeah.
performing well,' and then they screw up or they're going through a hard time or they cheated on a test or they're in trouble at school, and then you feel like you're a bad parent. If you're on that emotional roller coaster, your ego is
Yeah.
attached to your child's behavior. And what that's going to do is it's going to create this desire to control them to make
Yeah.
yourself feel better.
Feel better. Yep.
And that's what I was stuck in. I was stuck in that parenting trap and I couldn't detach. I couldn't detach my ego,
Yeah.
how I saw myself as a parent from their behavior.
That's
It took
right.
me years to understand that. And once I started pulling that apart, I was free. I was like, oh my God, they can
Yeah.
completely screw up and have a horrible day. And I don't have to be attached to that.
That's right.
I can be
That's
like, this is freedom. I can have a great day and give them the freedom to be themselves and to have a bad day and screw up and it not be attached to whether I'm a
that's
good or bad
right.
parent.
Yeah, that's a big one, I think, Evelyn. A lot of people get
Huge.
stuck into that. They really feel like it's all my fault
Mhm.
that they're not behaving. But again, that's ego as well. It is not your fault. It is just the things that are happening today. But that is a big one, I think, and that's a hidden one
It
that,
is.
yeah, that isn't talked about a lot, right?
And it's also it's ego and fear driven. And so a lot of the time when we're dealing with our kids, we have some kind of fear around their behavior. Like if they are disrespectful to their teacher, we might be responding to our kids from this fear of, oh no, people are going to think I'm a bad parent because my child was disrespectful to their teacher. And we create this story, but it's all
Mhm.
around fear. It's all fear based. And when we
Yeah,
show up as a parent from that fear, our kids feel it and it gets
absolutely.
translated to our kids or transferred, sorry, it's transferred to our kids. And so this dynamic, it keeps us, like I said, these are the traps. It keeps us
Yeah.
stuck in
Yeah,
this
I just wanna
toxic
mention another
cycle.
about fear, like, in the teenage
Yeah.
years. I
Yeah,
fell
there's a
prey to
lot of
this in
fear.
the teenage years. You see
Mhm.
some things going on, and you're fearful that your child's gonna step out and do some of the things that the friends are doing, and so then you try to hammer
Mhm.
down, we're gonna be closer, monitoring the things. So it's like your first 2 traps almost combined, right? Because I was parenting out of fear, that made me have more rigid rules.
Yes,
Right? Because I
exactly.
was trying to hold on to that control because my heart was so afraid of what might have happened to my child, right?
Absolutely.
As a teen out in the world. Yeah.
And we catastrophize,
Oh,
right?
so
Like
much.
your kid, you find out maybe they tried alcohol at a party or something, and then you're like, oh my God, they're going to become an alcoholic.
Yep.
And then we come down, like you said, with those rigid rules, which a
Mhm.
lot of the time amplifies the problem
It absolutely does.
because
Yeah.
we're not actually addressing what the problem is, the
Mhm.
underlying pieces of these 6 things.
Yeah.
So the third one is you and your kids are on the opposite team.
Mm.
And a lot of the time in dysfunctional homes, this is just a classic thing that tends to happen. But kids and parents, we're not seen as being on the same team. We feel like our kid is, when they're being disrespectful or defiant, they're pushing against us. And a lot of the time they're not. They're pushing against the parenting tools that we're bringing to the table.
Mm.
So those
Yeah.
are just symptoms showing up for us. And so, yeah, so I teach parents, okay, how can you solve this problem with your child? How can you work towards a solution and be on the same team?
Yeah.
But feeling like you have to win an argument, you have to prove your point as a parent. My
Mm.
son or daughter has to learn this lesson and I'm going to
Yeah.
teach them this lesson. That kind of mentality, or like having a winner or a loser in that situation, it's just going to be a shit show. It's not going to be good because no matter what, your child is going to strive to win. And the more they do that, the more you're going to try to up the ante to be the winner.
Yeah.
And they're always going to feel like a loser. So there's always this
Mhm.
power dynamic and imbalance that's really dysfunctional. It's really unhealthy.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's about that teamwork
Yeah.
and to build that at a younger age in not just before the power struggles come, right? They
Mhm.
start really young, right? A year and a half, and they don't want to put on their shoes or something,
Yes.
right?
They can
But
for sure.
yeah, but taking that family unit and looking at it as a team where you're preparing meals together, you're planning activities together, starting there will help build that team mentality for sure. But most of us weren't raised like that. Let's face it, Evelyn, right?
Right. Right.
My generation, we were just get outside, 8 a.m., come home when the street lights go on, or if you're hungry, there grab a slice of bread until supper's ready. And that was it. So it's a whole different world today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think when parents don't understand these traps, they don't know how to understand what the problem is. And so they just keep looking at their child like their
As the
child is the
problem.
problem.
And
And
yeah.
they try to fix their child, right? Like they try to fix the
Hmm.
behavior, but the behavior is just the symptom,
Yeah. It's
And
communication, right?
so it's communication. And most of us grew up with really ineffective communication
Hmm.
skills that we learned
Yep.
because
That's for
yelling,
sure.
threatening, bribing, scolding, belittling, shaming,
Yeah.
any of those things, that does not teach us the skills we need to be productive, effective adults. That does
Absolutely.
not teach us how to effectively communicate with another person or to share our needs, feelings, dreams, wants, desires in a healthy way. It
Hmm.
teaches us to stuff it and to become people pleasers.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
those are the cycles I'm trying to break. Those are the
Yeah.
cycles that I'm passionate about
Yeah.
teaching
Yeah.
parents how to break for themselves and their
Yeah.
kids.
That's so important. So
Absolutely.
important. There's 2 more.
There's 3 more.
3 more. Oh my gosh, we
Sorry.
only got to
There's
3.
6. There's 6 total. Okay, so this is another big one that parents do all the time and they don't understand that they're even doing this. It's where they overfunction for their child, do everything for their child
Mm-hmm.
to take care of them because they love them so much.
Yeah.
Or they do the opposite, where they're very hands off and have really high expectations of what their child should be able to do, but their child may not be developmentally ready for those things.
Yeah.
And there's this pattern that I've been picking up on where if we had, let's say, a parent who was an alcoholic or emotionally immature or a narcissist, that parent, there's like a role reversal that happens with their children where they
Mm-hmm.
rely on their kids for emotional support and stability a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And the child learns to kind of stuff their own desires and needs and wants to take care of the parent. When
Mm-hmm.
we've been treated that way in childhood, it's called parentification. And when we've been treated
Yes.
that way, we learn to be responsible for other people's feelings, thoughts, and needs.
Yeah.
So, fast forward 20 years and you become a parent yourself, you are still in the place of thinking, I'm responsible for other people's feelings, thoughts, and needs.
Yes.
And I'm going to fix it for everybody in my household.
Yeah.
And so then we do that for our kids. And when
Mm-hmm.
we come into our relationship with our kids where we are fixing their feelings, we're solving their problems for them, we are
Yeah.
basically telling them a story of who they are, that you're not capable. I
Yes.
don't believe in you.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm going to take care of it for you so you don't have to. So
Yeah.
kids learn to not be responsible for themselves because mom and dad are going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's this really messed up. We think we're
Well,
helping. We think
that
we're doing
and
the right thing. Go ahead.
that's huge, Evelyn, because I think I would guess 85% parents think that.
Yeah.
Especially with this new generation, because my generation, our parents didn't do diddly squat. You got supper, but
Yep.
so then this new generation is, I'm going to do everything for my kid. So they never have to worry. And it's all out of love. And yes, that's what the parent is thinking, that it's all out of love. And it truly, that we're not saying there's anything malicious happening here, but what they should understand is the child, from, like you said, the child's perspective, it's not building that sense of worth in the child, that I have confidence, I can do this, mom trusts me to do this, I can do hard things, that sense of that resilience that we want all of our children to have. The thing is, we can't forget, it doesn't just happen automatically. They have to
Mm-hmm.
be given opportunities to build that resilience. It's so important. And I was guilty of this. I say I totally did everything. I think I told you the funny story about my son. Both
Oh, I don't know.
16. Oh, it's hilarious.
Tell it.
And I love how our kids teach us. He's 16, 17. He's into video games. And so I'm cooking less, and my kids knew how to cook a few things or whatever. Anyway, he comes out of the room one day and he's, oh, I'm starving. I need food. I'm like, I said to him, honey, I said, sometimes you got to think about what you're going to eat. Evelyn, he looked right at me. He said, I never had to. I said, thank you. I said, thank you right away. I said, you know what? You're right. I did that to you. I provided, my kids had food intolerances and stuff. So I was just
Mm,
we got into meal planning, and just, that was just a natural thing I did, was when I was home in the morning, breakfast, at lunch, supper, right? Yeah, he totally
wow.
got me. But I took that and I thanked him. I was like, I
Good.
realized I did that to you and I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
let's try to switch it up. Let's cook something together tonight.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that your ego wasn't attached to that because you could have responded in a different
Mhm.
way and,
Absolutely.
and been like, how dare you say that about me? Don't you think I'm a
Yeah.
good parent? And been all offended.
Yeah. Not
But you
offended
were
at
like,
all.
actually, no, this is a moment to reflect on. And yeah, you're right.
Yep. I
I,
did
I
that
kind
to
of
you.
set this up. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally set it up. And
Mm-hmm.
we want that resilience. We're
Mm-hmm.
basically, someone said, the lady I recorded with this morning, she said, we're basically working ourselves out of a job here. Our
Hopefully.
kids they need that independence,
Yeah.
right? And by doing everything for them, I even think at my after school program, you have kids come in and they can't tie a shoe, or I had a 5-year-old that wasn't able to wipe themselves after a
Mm,
BM in the washroom. I'm like, these are skills that have to be taught, that aren't meant to be taught at a childcare center or in a school. Like, they have to be given as much responsibility for their life, but also because it builds that sense of self-worth.
yeah.
That I think is the piece that parents that are doing as I did are missing, that piece, that by doing everything, you're reducing that self-worth. And that's the
Absolutely.
piece I think that's being missed, because we know you parents all love your kids. Don't We know
Yes.
that.
And
And don't feel guilty. We're not here to
yeah,
talk about guilt. It's about being aware, right?
absolutely. And I think another piece of this that was an aha for me too was realizing at the end of the day, as much as we think we're doing this for our kids,
Mm,
not. We're
yeah.
doing this to feed our own sense of purpose
Yeah.
and feeling like a good parent, which
Mhm.
might be a gut punch for some parents. And
Yeah.
people might get their panties in a bunch a little bit about that one,
Yeah.
but it's
It
the
is what it
truth.
is. Yeah.
It's the truth. And I don't want to beat around the bush about it because it's important for parents to understand at the end of the day, if we are giving to our kids and doing things for our kids to feed ourselves,
Mhm.
that's messed up because we're
Yeah.
not looking out for the best interests of our kids, even though we might have the best intentions at heart.
Absolutely. Yep.
If we're going in there and rescuing them constantly from the outcome of their own decisions, they're never
Yeah.
going to learn to be accountable for anything that they ever do.
That's so
And it can
true.
be the most kindest. This is one of the things I learned in my positive discipline training was
Yeah.
it is the kindest thing you can do for your child is to allow them, give them the opportunity to be responsible for their actions. Meaning, if they forget their backpack
Yep.
from school, you don't necessarily rush it down to the school and drop it off.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay for that, not as a punishment, but just as a maybe they'll remember next time. Those kinds of
Yep.
things. And it depends on age appropriate, of course. Like, I'm
Yeah,
not saying this to
absolutely.
be punishing. I'm just saying there are moments throughout our days where you don't have to jump and meet the need. It's
Yeah.
okay to let them feel what it feels like to be
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, because that's how they develop the
Mhm.
resilience to deal with
Exactly.
the next uncomfortable situation. You're building muscles, you're building skills. That's what we're doing all constantly as a parent. And the other thing I like what you said is it brought up in me is that sometimes most times, we're so caught up in our role of parenting.
Mhm.
Right? So if you're so caught up in this role and this is only who you are and that you've lost every other part of yourself, who you were before you
Mhm.
had were became a parent, who you are in your relationship. I mean, that's a dangerous road to go down because if you're just focused on trying to be this perfect parent for your kid, which is really it's filling up that need, but is it because you're so deep in that role, you've lost those other parts of yourself, right?
Yeah. That's huge too. Identity.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Your own identity and being wrapped up in your child
Too much.
to an
Yeah.
extreme. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, this is so good. And so yeah, so that wraps up the fourth one, overfunction and underfunction.
Yes.
And then the fifth one is punishing for the past. And so
Mm.
what I teach parents to do is build skills for the future. So
Yeah.
rather than just squashing the behavior in the moment and punishing and disciplining for what they've done wrong, we're actually broadening that and thinking, okay, but what are the skills? If your child lies, let's say,
Yeah.
what are the skills you want them to learn so that they don't lie in the future? What are the
Mhm.
things they need to know how to do? Maybe they're lying because they don't want someone to be upset with them.
Yeah.
Digging and finding out why, the big why question is so important. What's the motivation? Why are they doing this behavior? But what I continue to see is parents just with that old school mentality of just, I'm gonna take away privileges. They
Yeah.
don't have their phone for a week or whatever. And I'm like, okay, that's fine as a consequence depending on the situation. But what is the goal here? What are we
Yeah.
actually working towards building? When your kid is 25 years old, what do you, besides resilience, because you mentioned resilience and that is an
Yeah.
amazing one. What are the other skills you want your child to have? Let's work on
Mhm.
building those skills so that these behaviors and other things aren't even an issue anymore,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah, and I have lots of examples for all of these too. So
Yeah.
if you want examples, I can definitely give examples. But so, yeah, punishing for the past is the
Yeah.
fifth one. And then the last one, oh boy, this is a big one. Blame, shame, and pain are
Mm.
present in the
Yeah.
relationship. And for most of us who grew up in any kind of dysfunctional or even traditional home,
Yeah.
We are familiar with what shame, blame, and pain means.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of us, we were not validated as children. Our
Only
feelings
when you
were
did something good.
disregarded.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, you get straight A's, you get some attention for that.
Yeah.
But me as a child, I learned to just I was a lost child in my family. So I learned to really stuff my emotions and to be as invisible as possible. And
Right.
so I just didn't try at anything
Mm-hmm.
because you can't fail if you don't try.
That's
So I
right.
just gave up on really
Mm-hmm.
trying anything and just skated through life like that for many years. But this dynamic where there's shame, blame, and pain in the relationship, and a lot of the time parents don't realize that when their kids trigger them, a lot of the time that shame, blame, and pain comes to the surface and they're triggered by their kids thinking it's their kids that have triggered them. It's
Yeah.
not.
It's not.
Their kids have brought something to the surface that needs to be healed. And so if
Mm-hmm.
parents can have a little mindset shift and realize when you're
Yeah.
triggered, you just received the most amazing gift ever because your kid is actually
Yes.
bringing to the surface some hidden wounds and pain that needs your
Mm-hmm.
attention. And if
Yes.
you can work on healing that pain, that shame, pain, and blame, then you're not projecting it back onto your kid because it comes up, we get triggered, it comes up, and then we just
Goes into the
shame, blame, and
cycle.
pain our
Yep.
kid.
Cycle back and forth.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then our kid takes that on. And now
Mm-hmm.
they've now received that message. And
Yeah.
so again, this is why it's a trap because we don't even know it's there. We're just stuck in these triggers
These
and these
patterns.
cycles and these patterns.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the things that I'm so passionate about helping parents get unstuck from because
Yeah.
we have to detox these crappy habits in order to bring in a new way of being with ourselves and with our kids to break this cycle.
Yeah. I totally agree. A couple of things that the blame and shame, that cycle. And when you say parents, something comes up and it's triggered in us, and that's
Mhm.
something that needs to be healed. I think there's a point where parents are just like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting triggered. Just tell me what to do. Because sometimes those wounds are so deep that you don't even know, that the parent may not even realize or remember how they
Mhm.
were brought up and treated by their parents or siblings or family. So do you find that it's difficult for them then to make that connection of like, why am I so triggered by this
Absolutely.
behavior, right? So are you able to help parents dig deep, or is that as, I don't know, like
Yeah.
that?
A lot of the time we stuff it so deep down because it's so painful.
Hmm.
And so when I'm working with parents and I see them doing this with their kids, they tell me stories about their child said something to them or was disrespect is like one of the big ones, right? Like
Yeah.
my child mouthed off to me or they were back talking me and then sent them
Hmm.
to the room and I yelled at them and da, da, da.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a lot of the time parents can't in the moment get in touch with, oh, I'm just projecting my own trauma onto my
Yeah.
kids. It's a really big concept to take on. And a lot of the time they don't even remember. And I don't remember like my parents we were not a yelling household.
Same.
We were much more covert, like
Hmm.
invisible kind of neglect, invisible kind of disregard of
Disconnection.
feeling,
Hmm.
disconnection. But
Hmm.
there definitely was like this, I don't know, environment of if we don't obey, we knew that we were gonna experience shame of some
Yeah.
kind. So that
Hmm.
kept us in line to do the right thing
Yeah.
until I got to be a teenager, and then I became a rebel.
Yeah. As we all
Like a
do.
lot of
I
people.
did too. Pick me.
Yeah, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
But no, so for me, like, when I'm working with people, it's not as important for them to like, "Oh, this one time when I was 7 years old, my dad did this or my mom did that."
Yeah.
That's not as important as it is for them to actually recognize that that is a symptom of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I teach them how do we deal with the shame, blame, and pain?
Mm.
For every one of these parenting traps that I help parents detox, I have the flip side
Yeah.
where I help them with these. And so the kind of medicine for each of these traps or the wounding to
Yeah.
heal each of these is having a shame-free mindset And so I teach parents how to think differently. And so how to incorporate neutrality, curiosity, and
Yes.
facts. And when they're able to do that, they're able to give their kids empathy and compassion and themselves empathy and compassion. So it
Yes.
breaks through that trauma response automatically because they're thinking differently. They're using different
Yes.
tools to think, and they have a different lens to think through. And that is one of the things that brings freedom so that parents can be free from the ego and the
Yes.
fear-based
And
parenting. So if
and the
we're able
triggers.
to, yeah, and the triggers, yeah. And so
Yeah.
if we're able to tap into curiosity
Mhm.
instead of judgment, able to tap into neutrality instead of this black and white thinking, like you're being bad or I'm being good. And let's just be neutral. Let's be curious
Mhm.
and let's focus on facts.
Yes. Yeah.
That is the approach and the formula that I help parents navigate how to discipline without shame, because we
Yeah.
cannot discipline without shame if we are having shame-based thoughts in our head. It's
Yeah.
impossible. It's going to get transferred through our body language and our tone and expression and all of those things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's it.
Listen, I love
That's
that.
all 6.
The curiosity is so important because back to I think it was your 5th trap that as parents we want to think about why the child has done something. And I wanted to clarify, we don't mean keep asking your kid, why did you do that? Like
Right.
asking a 2-year-old, why did you dude, they don't know. And
Yeah.
any child that's dysregulated, they don't know. But to have for a parent to that sense of curiosity that, okay, so why I wonder might that? Because then when you're curious, you start thinking, is it, are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they had a rough day? Did they have a
Yeah.
fight with their best friend? You just open to, there's a world of possibilities for this behavior. It is a type of communication, right? That, that we want to be neutral about because really that just takes you to more of a peaceful place when you're neutral about it.
Mhm.
The other thing I love you said about the parents that they don't understand what these triggers are, and that we as coaches, we don't take you down the road of therapy unless you want to go there.
Right.
But I love about what your process is that you can help them break those triggers without having to go down there. What's the point of going back there? We're here,
Mhm.
we're present, we're now, and we want to do the best for our kids. And so by just breaking they are just patterns of triggers of
Mhm.
behavior in parents that are happening in these situations. And with that mindset shift of neutrality and facts,
Curiosity and
right?
facts. Yeah,
And
those 2 things.
curiosity are so powerful. And I don't think they're not talked about enough. They're
No,
not
they're
talked
not.
about enough that you could literally just tell a parent, okay, just connect, be curious, right? Follow the facts and be neutral. That could basically, like, fix every parenting problem on the planet.
Absolutely, because it's a clear lens
Yeah.
to look through. It's
Mhm.
not tainted with all of our baggage,
Yeah.
because when we have been raised in dysfunction, or I say traditional parenting, which is
Yeah,
dysfunctional,
I think so. Mhm.
there's so much judgment and there's so much criticism, and there's this
Yeah.
black and white thinking of the parent is always good, the child is always wrong and bad, and there's just it distorts our perception, it distorts everything. And I have a story
Yeah,
about
yeah.
this that
I love stories.
I would love to tell. So this happened with my son. So this is a personal story, but this was a huge moment for me as a parent. I was in the middle of my parent coaching certification.
Yeah.
I think it was like 2018 or something like that. And before COVID, my boys were 4 and 2 at the time.
Mhm.
I had them in the bathtub. I was sudsing them up and they were playing in the bathtub. My 4-year-old, his name is Mateo, he stood up in the bath and he took a full cup of water and he looked over the edge of the bathtub and he dumped it out of the tub. And I'm
Yeah.
sitting there and I'm just like, he knows the rules. He
Yeah.
knows not to do that. But I was like, I'm going through this parent coaching training. So I'm like, breathe. Okay. Like I'm
Breathe.
going to be a conscious parent in this moment,
Yeah.
even though I want to yell at him.
Yeah.
And so I throw a towel down on the floor and I'm like, I get his eye contact. I'm like, hey, bud, please don't put water on the floor. It just makes a mess and everything. And he
Yeah.
looked at me. He was just like in his own little world, like 4-year-olds are. So
Yeah.
I'm like washing my 2-year-old and getting him ready to take out of the bath. I look over and Mateo takes another cup of water. He's still standing up and does it again in front of me. And I had these thoughts run through my head. The
Mhm.
thoughts were, how dare you disrespect me right in front of
Yep.
my face? I had another thought that was so many thoughts
Yeah.
flooding my
Yeah.
my mind about, you will not disrespect me that way. It was like
I just
all
told you not
about,
to do it. Yeah.
I just told you not to do it. How dare you do this?
Yeah.
And then I had this moment of realization, of realizing that I was in this place of triggered and wanting to react and this angry
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I'm like, I had this moment where I was just like, why is he doing this?
Yeah.
He knows he's not supposed to. Like, why is he dumping water out of the bathtub?
Yeah.
So rather than,
Getting
I took a deep
curious.
breath and I got
Mhm.
curious, exactly. And I stayed neutral. So I took a deep breath, and rather than just, because I would have, if I was not in the parent coaching training and had done all of my work, probably grabbed his arm and been like, how dare you do that? Swat
Mhm.
him on the butt, get him out of the tub, yelled at him,
Yep.
whatever. And he probably would have started crying. It would have
Yep.
caused all of this commotion and pain.
Mhm.
Instead, I took a deep breath and I just looked at him in the eye and I said, hey, bud, what were you trying to do? It's a really
Yeah.
powerful question to ask a child, especially
Mhm.
a preschooler. I said,
So surprising the
what were
answers.
you
Yeah.
trying to do when you dumped water out of the bathtub?
Mhm.
And without even pausing, he says, Mama, I'm a fireman trying to put out a fire. And I was
Yep.
like, okay,
Yep.
all right. So you're a fireman. He was so caught up in his play and
Yes.
imagining that he's a fireman, that when I first told him the first time not to do it, he
He
was
didn't
just in his
hear.
own little world
Mhm.
because he's a fireman putting on a fire.
That's right, and there was no fire in the tub. The
There's
fire
no
had to be
there's
out
a
of the
fire
tub.
out of the top. Exactly.
Totally makes sense.
Totally makes sense. So I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah.
So I said, "Hey, bud, so this is where taking that trigger and putting it to the side, using these new tools of neutrality,
Mhm.
curiosity, and focusing on facts." So I
Yeah.
asked them, "Okay, what is it you're trying to do?" "I'm trying to put out this fire." I'm like, "Okay, how can you put out the fire and keep the water in the bathtub?" So
Problem
that's the
solving,
boundary.
critical thinking
Right.
too. Love it.
And I put the question back in his lap
Yes.
and said, "Hey, how can you abide by this boundary of the water staying in the bathtub and you
Mhm.
also still be able to be a fireman putting out fire?"
Yeah.
So we brainstormed a few ideas. And so we have in that particular bath in our house, we have the shower wand like up top. So I
Mhm.
didn't turn the water on, but I gave that to him and he thought
Yeah.
it was the coolest thing. And so he was
It's a fire
pretending like he's
hose.
spraying it like a real
Yeah.
fireman. And I
That's
was
awesome.
like, and so it ended up being such a beautiful moment in my relationship with him because
Mhm.
at no point did he get scolded for playing
Yeah.
or having a big imagination. And I knew he wasn't doing it from a place of spite
No.
or rebellion. And even if he had been, that
Yeah.
doesn't give us as parents an excuse to disregard and hurt our kids when
Yeah.
they have done something wrong. And so for
Absolutely.
me, I thank God was going through my parent training, but that was a pivotal moment in my own parenting where I
Mhm.
realized, ah, I'm starting to
Yeah.
understand this now.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
is
yeah,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say one more thing. I think it really just helped give me a new understanding of asking those questions. And so from then on, anytime he did something I didn't like or he was
Yeah.
breaking the rules, I would always ask him, "What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
What is your goal here?" Because once I
Yeah.
understood his goal, then I could help brainstorm, okay, how can you meet that goal or get that thing within the boundary that you
Yeah.
need to follow? And
Mhm.
that just opened up so many opportunities and conversations for us to problem solve together
Yes.
and being solution focused and
Huge.
and helping him like, hey, let's problem solve. That is a life skill children need to
Critical
learn.
thinking,
And
absolutely.
it's just these are the things that I teach parents and I'm so passionate about teaching them because we get unstuck, but then what
Yep.
are the new tools we need to
Yeah,
learn?
what do we do with
These are the
that?
new tools we need to learn right here is
Yeah.
asking those questions and knowing how to do it in such a way where we're honoring, like honoring his play, Like, I honored his play. I honored what he was envisioning, and I didn't disregard the fact that he was wanting to do that. I was like, "Here, let's just do it within this boundary instead."
Yeah. Mhm.
And so anyway, so that was just
Yeah.
a pivotal moment for me to realize, okay, I'm starting to understand this a little bit deeper.
It's a beautiful story to point out how the strategies that you teach parents, how they work
Yeah.
by noticing that trigger like you did. And I'm really glad you were authentic. And that's why I love these conversations enough to, you were thinking what many parents would be thinking. Why the hell did you do that again? But
Yep.
that's the first step in changing those pattern thoughts in parents is to stop and be aware of them and listen to them.
Yeah.
Right. And be like, once you practice that, then you're like, "Where the hell are these thoughts?" Then you realize this is a trigger. This is a trigger. And so you take your few deep breaths, and that's all it takes, 3. I always recommend 3.
Mhm.
3 deep, heartfelt breaths, and what are you trying to do, bud? And it might be for the first few times, might be through gritted teeth, right? Because 'Cause you're annoyed because the
Yep.
floor is wet or whatever.
Yes.
But then and putting it back on the child is awesome. We need to be doing that more to build that autonomy, that sense of worth, all of those putting it back on the child to help problem solve and find the solution only helps them, as you said, like a life skill and in their daily lives. That even when so a couple of years, 8 now, if he's 8 years old, he'll think about that.
Mhm.
How can I do this differently to stay within the boundaries of the playground at school? Or like any situations that they come up against, or not against, but go through when parents are not around. Think of the value of that, guys. Like the value of that when you're not around. That's what we all want for our kids, to have that sense of worth and sense of curiosity and problem solving skills and critical thinking skills for the rest of their lives. That's what we all want. I love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm just so grateful that in that moment I was able to see it for what it was. And
Mhm.
also I wanna put this out there too for parents. If you can just take your thoughts, they feel so personal to us. They feel like they're really our thoughts. They are
Yeah.
not our thoughts. They were passed down to us
Mhm.
from past generations. So see it like you're watching clouds if you
Yeah.
can. They're just
Mhm.
going to pass through you. You're going to get a rush of emotion from those thoughts.
Yeah.
But I really encourage you to not react in that moment. That's where we get
Mhm.
trapped. That's where we get stuck. So if
Yeah.
you can, wait a moment, take a beat, and then respond. If you
Yes.
respond, it's different than reacting. When you respond, you have access to the prefrontal cortex. You're able to like
Mhm.
with empathy and compassion, and you're going to bring a lot more connection with your children and with
Yeah.
yourself.
Absolutely. That the breath to break that cycle, as you say, because if we don't stop to take that breath, that first thought that says, "Oh, I can't believe you just did that." It'll attract another one just like
Yep.
it, and it'll attract another one just like it again, and before you know it, you got 15 of them in there, and you're just ready, blood boiling. That's that little piece of taking those 3 breaths is so important because I love your analogy of clouds. With my parents, I use the analogy of an airport. Actually, I've used this with my elementary
Oh, it's
school
good.
teachers too. My elementary school children that, yes, they're also my teachers. I'm sure some of them will be watching this. We have 60,000 thoughts a day. And so I tell them,
Mm,
imagine you're in an airport and you're watching all these 60,000 people going by. Are you following them all?
mm,
Is
that's
that even possible? It's not possible. So we get to choose which ones we follow for our mindset change. And with
yeah,
parents with these triggers, they come in, they come hot, they come hard. I get it. We've all been there, right?
yeah,
But literally in that moment, 3 deep breaths because you're changing the neural pathways in your own brain,
yeah.
right? By doing that, by just stopping it instead of letting it spiral out. And we're not going to get into super brain science here today. We might in the future because I love brain science. I'm a bit of a nerd in that way. It's just when you think of just 3 deep breaths, the benefits for yourself and for your child are innumerable, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's also important to realize what's the behavior we're modeling ourselves. So if
Mm,
I was to have grabbed my son's arm, spanked him on the butt,
Yeah.
taken him out of the bathtub, put him in his room and time out. What message am I telling him about how to treat other people when they don't do what you want them to do?
Yes.
Right. And
Absolutely.
so we are making that okay. We are
Yeah.
saying this is how we treat people when we don't like what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so when we use manipulation and control and threats and bribes and spanking and shame to control our children, we're teaching them to do that with other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What just went through my head when you said that, Evelyn?
Mm,
Your 2-year-old at the time. Like, if you
yeah,
had done that night in the tub, I bet you it wouldn't have been 3 days later, you would have saw your 4-year-old doing that to your 2-year-old.
exactly.
Guaranteed.
Exactly.
And that awareness of you can say what you want to kids. They watch us,
They
right?
do.
We are modeling at all times, and we can't be perfect at all times.
Mm,
And honestly, I don't think it would serve our children if we were. If there
no,
ever was such a thing as a perfect parent, how is that ever gonna teach a child how to repair a situation when you screw up, right? As a parent, your child's older, or even at any age, to go back to them and say, "Man, I screwed up, right? I am so sorry. I'm gonna try it a different way. I was feeling this way." All of that modeling, comes from our mistakes, and so we have to have the mistakes. We don't live with unicorns and rainbows all the time in this parenting journey. So
that's
it's
true. Yeah,
the mistakes are valuable. I know that's weird for people to hear, but that's how our children learn, and we become better, and we teach them about that relationship and connection that it's okay to screw up. We're all going to screw up, but here's how you deal with it when you do. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. And I feel like as parents, we have this automatic get out of jail free card
Mm,
where we're still in the mindset of do as I say, not as I do. I
yeah.
can yell at you for being annoyed
Yeah.
or mad at you because you're not listening, quote unquote. But if
Hmm.
you yell at your brother or sister, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So we're constantly sending your kids this mixed message that
Yeah.
it's okay for me to do it, but you're going to get in trouble for doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, and they're so smart. Oh my gosh, Evelyn.
So
They
smart.
clue into
Yeah.
that real quick, right? I think this has been an amazing conversation. We could probably talk
Yeah.
for 3 hours.
We could easily, I know.
Yeah. But that's okay. We'll have
No,
lots
this
of
has been
snippets from
wonderful.
lots of teasers. So, because I have to
Yeah.
get to my questions that I ask all my guests at the end.
Yes. Yes. Please do. Please do.
Yes, this has been wonderful. I'm so excited too. Can't wait till it airs. What is your definition of a fulfilled life?
Oh, this is such a good question. A fulfilled life. I've actually been pondering this question lately. I think it's when you figure out your purpose and what you were meant to do on this earth
Mm,
and you pursue that, whatever that thing might be.
yeah.
I think that is what a fulfilled life is. So I think it's very specific to each person because we're
Yeah.
all here for different reasons. We all have different gifts. We have different things to offer this world. And I've been struggling with my own
Yeah.
kind of purpose for so long. And it hasn't been until recently that I'm realizing this is my purpose
Yeah.
is teaching parents this stuff. And when I'm not sharing my story and sharing with parents and teaching parents, I don't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
I feel just going through
Same.
life. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But when I'm teaching and training and working with people and seeing transformation happen in front of my eyes, that brings me so much fulfillment.
Absolutely.
But so I think it really is so incredibly personal to each person
Yeah,
of
I
whatever that
agree.
is for
I
them.
agree. Find
What
their
fills your bucket, you
That's
know?
right. Fill your bucket, fill your cups. Yeah, it's so important. I love that. How will you know you did a good job raising your children?
When they can confront me when they're adults and tell me how I screwed up,
Yeah.
and I take responsibility for it.
Yep,
Because here's the thing, I'm still making mistakes every single day.
we all
I'm
do.
still
Yeah,
having to own my shit when I do screw up. There are still things that come up daily with my kids where
yeah,
I'm like,
absolutely.
I was a little, meh, I shouldn't have said it that way, or I
Yeah,
could have done better. So it's not about being perfect. It's
doesn't
about
exist.
improving. It's about
Mhm.
growing and being excited about learning and shifting and changing.
Yeah,
So that's how I'm going to know.
Yeah,
is when
I
my
love that.
my kids feel so comfortable and solid in our relationship that they can come to me as an adult and confront me and say, "You did this to me when I was a kid and it
Yeah,
hurt and I'm scarred by it." And I'll say,
yep,
"I will 100% take responsibility for that and I am so sorry.
absolutely.
Let's repair. Let's work
Yeah,
on healing that for you so you're not carrying around that baggage."
yes. That's the biggest piece. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So, what's something you tell yourself during those challenging times when you're having a really rough go of it? You have a little mantra or something?
Yes, and it's so cliche.
That's okay.
I wish it wasn't so cliche. I wish it was like just something so profound,
Oh, no,
but
as long as it works. I don't
as
care if
long as it
it's
works,
fiddly sticks. It
as long
as
as it
long as
works,
it
works for
works.
me. I don't
That's
know if it's
right.
gonna work for every parent, but this too shall pass.
3
This isn't
times so
gonna
far. Yep.
Yeah, this isn't gonna last forever. Your kid, whatever you're going through, isn't gonna be at this developmental stage forever.
That's right.
You're not gonna be stuck forever. And I
Mhm.
tell parents constantly, it really is 2 steps forward, 4 steps back, or 1 step forward,
Yep.
3 steps back. It is this dance, and as
Yep.
long as the overall trajectory is improving, you're doing
That's
great.
what's like, it's true. It's
You're doing
true.
great.
Because the only thing constant in life is change, right?
Yep.
That's the only thing we can be guaranteed, that everything's gonna change, right?
Yep. Mhm.
So, our job is to help parents enjoy that journey a little bit more and understand, like you say, as long as you're getting on that trajectory where you wanna go, awesome, you're doing
Mhm.
great. And I want everybody that's listening, you're doing great. All
Yeah.
right. So, finally, where can people find you, Miss Evelyn?
So cyclebreakerparenting.com is
Mhm.
my website. On my website, I have a freebie that I would encourage anybody who is listening to this to get, which is a 20-minute video and a PDF printout. And it's 3 steps to break the cycle of dysfunctional parenting.
Love it.
So I break it down, what we talked about today. I break it down
Yeah.
so you can really decode your dysfunction and really see clearly how the generational trauma is possibly getting passed down through you.
Yeah.
And then I offer free 30 minutes consultations called strategy sessions. You can get to on my website. But I do have a new program that I'm super excited about where I take people through and we go through all of these steps to detox your dysfunctional parenting habits. I teach you the shame-free discipline strategy. There's what do I call it? The cycle breaker family roadmap, where I teach you a 5-step formula to break this generational cycle forever.
Love
So
it.
you have all of those tools. It's toolbox after toolbox after toolbox. It's building on each other.
Yeah.
And that's called Stop the Trauma Drama. And so, yeah, it's a full on parent makeover program for anyone who grew up in dysfunction and they want to
Mhm.
deal with that baggage so their kids don't have to.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
love
who
it.
that's for.
We'll put
So
all the links in the description. So if
perfect.
whatever we want, send them separately so people can choose what they want to look at. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, honey. It's
Wonderful.
always great to chat with you.
It's wonderful to chat with you too, Natalie. Thanks so much for having me on. This was
No problem.
wonderful. I loved
We'll
it.
be doing it again, I'm sure.
Yes,
That I can
absolutely.
guarantee.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
So glad you're still here. You do not suck as a parent. But I want you to know about something that we've created. The coaches and the experts that you see in this show, we've gotten together and we've created a community. It's called the Powerful Parenting Collective, where you as a parent can enter our group and have access to many of the experts that you see on the show, to private message them, to have a quick little video chat before you decide to hire them to help you in your parenting journey. Or maybe you decide not to do that. I want you to think about a community that is supportive, that will have events for you, free workshops, free information, and a place where you can really connect with the different experts that you've seen on this show. So click the link below and join us. Basically, think of it like a shopping mall for parents. We hope to see you there.